What's going on, everybody? FreakyDude99 here, coming at you with an Endgame Solar Titan build. This is a build I've been using in Inspire the Watcher, Legend Lost Sectors, the Seraph mission, pretty much any Endgame content. I've been using this build, and it has carried me through, carried my fire team through, and yeah, it melts everything. So let's get into it. Now we are using Hammer of Soul currently, but if you want to use Burning Maul, it's a personal preference. Of course, we are using Rally Barricade because of its shorter cooldown over Cowering Barricade. Next up, we're using Throwing Hammer. It is just so much better than Hammer Strike, plus it's up pretty much all the time. And then we are using Healing Grenade. Now you can swap Healing Grenade out for something like your Thermite in the lower level content, but I find Healing Grenade really helps in giving you a quick burst of healing, especially whenever your Loreley's isn't running. Now for our first aspect, we're going to be running Roaring Flames. This makes it so our solar ability kills are going to increase the damage of all of our solar abilities, including our super, as well as whenever we lose our hammer, our uncharged melee is still going to pump out damage and basically count as a charged melee, which means you can keep Roaring Flames up and get your throwing hammer back whenever you happen to miss. Now next up, we're using Soul Invictus for our second solar aspect. This makes it so our solar ability final blows, our super kills, and just defeating scorched targets are going to create sunspots. Sunspots help us heal a lot faster as well as regenerate our abilities. This is going to make the flow of battle a lot easier and is going to add so much more sustain to this build. Now moving on to the fragments. First off, we're starting off with Ember of Singeing. Our class ability regenerates faster whenever we scorch targets. This is going to be very important for keeping our barricade up, so we can constantly have restoration going with Loreley's. Next up, we're using Ember of Empyrean. This makes it so our solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration and Radiant. This is going to be very helpful as Radiant gives us a damage bonus and Restoration lets us live forever pretty much. Next up, we're using Ember of Torches. This makes it so whenever we throw our throwing hammer and it strikes an enemy, we become Radiant as well as all of our allies become Radiant. This is very good for keeping that damage up as well as providing a good damage bonus to all of our allies. And finally, for the fragments, we're going to be using Ember of Solace. This is just to make Radiant and Restoration effects last longer. This makes it so we have an easier time keeping those up and they don't just disappear as quickly, because as soon as Restoration goes away in hard content, you die pretty quickly. Now, next up with the weapons, of course, with my builds, weapons are very fluid, as I don't like to restrict people to using a certain set of weapons. For me, I use a pulse rifle Peace of Mind in my primary. I'm using the Callus mini tool as my submachine gun with incandescent so I can apply scorch stacks. Be sure to be using something that can apply scorch stacks, whether it be an incandescent weapon or an exotic weapon. And then finally, I am using Parasite as my grenade launcher. This helps in one-shotting any champion enemies, as well as doing some massive damage on bosses. You can also use Cry Mutiny, as it also implies incandescent and is lovely for clearing out large hordes of enemies. For the helmet, we are going to be using Lorelei Splendor. This exotic is fantastic. It has been nerfed 3 times, but it still proves itself as one of the top dogs in exotics for Titans. This makes it so whenever we are critically wounded or we cast our barricade, we create a sunspot at our feet that has improved restoration effects. This makes us virtually unkillable. This makes us nearly unkillable, as whenever we go down to low health, we just drop a sunspot and we get restoration, and restoration lasts longer because of our fragments, which means we just end up surviving as long as possible and as long as we want. Now for the mods, we're going to be using melee well makers, so whenever we get a kill with our throwing hammer, we're going to spawn a well. We're also using harmonic siphon, so whenever we get a solar weapon kill, we spawn an orb of power. Personally, I have a fusion rifle ammo finder because I like to run merciless. You can't really run anything unless you plan on using sharpshooting or legacy ambush. And then I have a discipline mod. Next up on the gauntlet, I'm going to be running solar energy so we can have access to Well of Ordnance. So whenever we pick up a well, our grenade comes back faster, which makes it so our healing grenade can heal us even more and even more often. Using this also lowers our energy cost enough to give us access to Unstoppable Grenade Launcher and Anti-Barrier Pulse Rifle. Now of course, you switch up the mods depending on what you are doing, but with Unstoppable Grenade Launcher being 7 energy, it means it's very hard to fit into builds. This is why using Well of Ordnance here is so good. And as well as, of course, I have a minor resilience mod. Now for the chest piece, we're going to be running void energy and we are going to be using Fontamite. This makes it whenever we pick up a well, our solar weapons are going to do more damage. This is going to give our Callus mini tool, but also Parasite and Cry Mutiny, and potentially Cataclysmic, if you are using that, a big damage bonus. We are also using Concussive Dampener and Void Resistance, as if you're playing the new dungeon a lot, there's a lot of void damage in there. And then of course a resilience mod. Next up for the legs, we're using solar energy so we can gain access to Well of Life. Whenever we pick up a solar well, we are going to get a short period of healing. I am also using linear fusion rifle holster, but you can use any mod you want here. I personally use innervation. I find it's a lot better than recuperation, as having your grenade up more means you have an on-demand healing rather than an every so often healing. And then of course a resilience mod. And finally, for the class item, we are running Stasis Energy so we can gain access to Elemental Time Dilation. This means our Font of Might as well as our Well of Life last longer. Those are such big help, and Well of Life lasting longer is much more noticeable than you think it would be without Elemental Time Dilation. And then of course we are using Utility Kickstart, so our class energy comes back even sooner whenever we use it. This is very important for keeping that gameplay flow of Loreleis up. And then I like to use Monochromatic Maestro. This means whenever we get kills or hit things with our throwing hammer, our solar weapons gain a damage bonus. This is very good as the flow of this build is all about running, gunning, throwing your hammer, and blowing up everything. Of course, if you are in solo content where you have no one else in your fire team, you should use Solo Operative, as it is better for just solo content. As you can see from the footage, we are in the Legend Heist Battleground, which we are capped 10 power underneath. And we're not sweating it. Even the flames around us aren't causing us to sweat, because with our grenade, with our hammer, we're brute and force through everything. Parasite clears out any barrier champs and bosses super easy. And then Callus mini tool just causes explosions everywhere, which clears out any adds you need. And then if there's an enemy with a shield that is hard, like a void or an arc shield, one that you can't easily break through, just rack up your ×3 roaring flames with your throwing hammer, go back to that shield guy and whack, take that shield down like it was nothing. This build just decimates everything, nothing stands in its way. I'm literally going to be using this build over and over and over again, whether I'm doing the dungeon, whether I'm doing a raid, whether I'm doing legend activities, because it decimates everything and you don't have to compromise on any of the things you love from previous Solar Titan builds. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Freaky Dude 99, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.